Starting off with the credit environment here in China, how much demand are you seeing given the government is making this big push to lend to private enterprise here?
Actually, we see the demand rising. I mean, the Chinese economy is looking for new ways to grow, right? And the growth driver is obviously in private sectors with small and medium-sized enterprises, etc., in startups who are leveraging technology to innovate, etc. And credit resources going into this direction is certainly much more on demand.
There's also the concern about the quality of credit and about the ability of some of these private sector players to pay it back. And we've seen a tick up in bond defaults. To what extent have you had to take write-downs? How much have you had to take in terms of your portfolio of credit, in terms of write-downs?
Actually, it affects our own business rather less because we were focusing and are focusing all the time on SME segment, etc. And this is rather a stable segment and robust. And on the whole economic level, you actually have been seeing these deleveraging processes going on for quite a couple of years. But this is a structural change. So all the defaults and problems you see in that world, it is the consequences of this deleveraging. And we're talking about overcapacities, etc. If you want to remove them out of the market, and during these processes, you certainly will see some defaults. So I think it's just part of it.
Right. And Zhang Yue, we've seen the government crack down quite a bit when it comes to the P2P lending sector in particular after some high-profile cases. I'm just wondering, do you think that the worst is over for the sector?
Actually, we should go back to why ever this sector was being created. It is because you have this huge unmet needs in individuals and small enterprises that you can't get enough funding, right? And this demand today is still there. And P2P has been proving itself to be one of the effective ways to solve this problem, to meet those needs. But certainly has a lot of problems caused as well. Part of the reasons are in the lacking of a complete regulatory framework. I think this is exactly the part which the whole sector and the regulators are working together. And we are providing our support and compliance as well during these processes.
Yeah, and we have seen tighter regulation. There's reports from Caixin saying that regulators have asked P2P platforms now to send data to credit reporting systems. So that certainly could help your risk control costs. But I'm just wondering, does it make it more difficult for you to do business? Because now they're asking P2P lending platforms like yourself to act more like a traditional bank.
Actually, just to the contrary, it is helping us to do our business that we could now connect to the central bank's credit rating system. Because that way we could get much more reliable data to assess the risk of our lenders. And we could also feed back our business results back to the system to help other players that we could co-manage the whole debt situation. Actually, I truly don't think that's a cost or a burden for us. That's a great opportunity for us to expand our capabilities.
Just focusing on the wealth management side of the business, can you give us an update in terms of assets under management, how many clients you have, and what your ambitions are for expanding beyond China?
Actually, expanding beyond China is right now only on the asset level because the huge accumulation of wealth of Chinese investors are looking for global diversification. This is a very natural consequence when you have a ever-growing wealth volume. We are still very much focusing on meeting domestic needs. China has a 200 trillion wealth market. And the banks are only taking up a share roughly about 10%. So there is a huge room for independent wealth managers to meet. And that is exactly the opportunity we want to take.
Final question, I guess also related to wealth management here. I mean, you're part of the third-party independent wealth management sort of part of the business as well. You are, of course, a very big player there. We've seen several other firms, not you guys, several other firms run into trouble, difficulties. Do you think, is that a company-specific problem, or do you think it's an industry-wide issue that we need to be aware of?
Actually, it is the characteristics of wealth management as a very young industry in China. Young in the sense that first, you investors are not mature and they are not sophisticated enough to accept this asset allocation concept, which is the core of wealth management. But in recent years, you have seen great improvement on this. And on the other side, asset management in China is also a very young industry. And to wealth management, asset management is a back kitchen, right? You cannot serve a 7-course dinner without a capable kitchen. And when this kitchen is young, the product diversification is not enough. So, yeah, and that affects what you can do for your client for asset allocation, et cetera, et cetera. So if you talk about industry-wide challenges, I would rather say this is just very typical for a young market. But this is also a charm of it, right? If you can solve this problem, then this is certainly a huge opportunity.